Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this seminar, this presentation. Today, we are very honored to have Professor Rene de Koster at University, Erasmus University, and Professor Rene de Koster comes from RSM, Rotterdam School of Management. And at first, please allow me to introduce Professor Rene de Koster, okay? And his research interests includes warehousing and material handling and container terminal. And Professor Rene de Koster is very famous in the field of warehousing and internal logistics. And today, Professor Rene de Koster will give us a presentation about human robots collaboration in order picking, okay? And we will have about 1 hour presentation, and then we can have some Q&A, okay? Okay, next, please welcome Professor Rene de Koster.
Thank you very much, Deepan, for this very nice introduction and for inviting me over. So I really feel honored that Deepan, we have been collaborating for quite some time. Already since 10 years, we have been collaborating. So I'm very happy to be able to visit him in a new position. Well, his previous position was at another university, but I'm very happy to also visit him here. So I feel really honored that you invited me. Of course, I'm also very happy to meet Guang Mei and you all. So, indeed, my topic is on warehousing. So, Deepan asked me to tell something about research in that direction, warehousing. Order picking. Can we see the slide from over there? Can you see the screen? So there's a bit of reflection. You can see it. So I decided to tell something about collaborative robots. So collaborative robot picking. It basically means you have to order pick in a warehouse. In the warehouse, you receive orders from customers. If you order something online, there's a fulfillment center somewhere where these orders are picked for you. That's the fulfillment center, the warehouse I'm talking about. And one of the technologies that is increasingly used is that people work together with robots. So we work jointly, we do the work together. So not a person only or not a robot only, no, it's joint operation. So that's my topic. So first I want to tell something about order picking with robots in general. Then collaborative picking, so joint picking with robots. And then I want to address a couple of research questions that I've been trying to answer over time. So in different papers. So I want to address 4 research questions. Maybe I'm not going to finish everything because I want to stop at 4 o'clock. So just touch on the last one. We'll give a bit more attention to the first ones. Okay, so if you talk about automated warehouses and robots, you might look at what are all the different technologies that are used currently in warehousing. And there are all kinds of technologies. So every box here is the technology that's used in storage and order picking in warehouses. And if you look at all these different systems, all the ones in the top left corner are order picking systems that are around already since 60 years. So they're automated. It's the only automated picking, so not manual, only automated. But these technologies here are already around since ages. So since the middle of the 19th. This is basically done, for example, with cranes. So you have aisle captive cranes that cannot leave the aisle. So they retrieve a tote with a product or a pallet with a product. You take it out of the warehouse and bring it into an order pick station. At the order pick station, there's still a human picking the part. Right? So this is called a parts to picker system. The parts are brought by the machine, by the system, to the order picker. And then the remainder of the pallet or the tote goes back. So you pick something from a custom order, but the remainder goes back. So this is class automation. And all the other systems that you see here are new technologies. So they're only around since about 20 years. And the newest ones are only around since a few years. So every year, innovative in that respect, in coming up with all kinds of novel robotics. Okay, so what type of systems are that? So here I've you might say this is more or less classic automation already. Is the Kiva. Kiva, also called Amazon Robotics, or if you don't want to tie a company name to it, you might call it Robotic Mobile Fulfillment System. That's the name that we invented ourselves, to be honest. Internet connection not good?
Yeah, can I play your slides online?
How do we do that?
Okay.
Whatever. Should I stop now? I can stop. You try to fix it. Yeah? You try to fix it. Okay, sorry for the short break. And I'll take a little bit.
So,
for the big bird.
something. So say also so what I don't know. It's a big part of itself. I think it's going to continue for a couple of 2 months. Oh, make sure you have to make still then. Sorry, I need to connect. Oh.
So we need 2 extra minutes, unfortunately. It's helpful to get some more tea. Yeah, something like that in a big class. Huh? So I teach courses with up to 1,000 students. So you have something like that. You know, of course, you know, but in a small group you can do it there. The students all start doing something.
Yeah.
Relax.
Sorry.
I'm relaxed. Most of the people online can now hopefully see my slides. So I was talking about the Kiva system, also called robot mobile fulfillment systems. So these are systems that are around since about now 15 years or so, I think. So you see these small red things, these are robots. They can carry a whole rack and bring it to a big station, also parts to pick. So in China, I think the most well-known company who supplies these types of robots is a Dig Plus. They supply these types of robots. But there are several others as well. So here I have another system. This is called a puzzle-based system. So what can be done in this system, you have very dense storage. So every blue spot here is a product, is a pallet, for example. Pallet that can be moved. So if something can ride underneath, a robot can drive underneath. So these orange circles are robots that can drive underneath, lift it up, and bring it to the green exit in the left lower corner. However, you see there's only 2 empty spots here. So in order to get this pallet to this position, we have to move out of the way some other blocking tiles. So we have to reshuffle them. And the question is, how many moves do you need in order to get, if you have 3 robots and 2 empty cells in this grid 5x5, to get the red pallet out of the system? So these systems do exist. Not necessarily only with robots, but some also work with conveyors, so full-way conveyors. So called puzzle-based. This is another system. This is already around a bit longer, about 20 years or so. So these are shuttle-based storage systems. We have shuttles working at every level in the rack. it can retrieve the tote, bring it to a lift. The lift goes down on a conveyor and it brings it to a pick station. Also parts to pick. Other technologies, these are rack climbing robots. To take, for example, antibiotics, the robots behave like autonomous robots outside the rack, but inside the rack they can drive in and climb the rack, take out the tote, descend and bring it to a pick station. And this is an innovation from China. This is a high robotics system, or also big robotics, it's the same type of system. By the way, there are now several others who have this. So these are robots that can retrieve totes from multiple levels and drive around and just retrieve all the totes for the robot. Another climbing robot system is a US manufacturer. This is a completely autonomous order picking even. So this is a spin-off of the Technical University of Munich. So already operational for 10 years, I think. These are automated picking systems. AutoStore, the most popular, I think this is really the most popular automated warehouse in the world. AutoStore is already 1,300 warehouses who have that system. And every day the number is growing. It's really very popular. But I want to talk about these. The right lower corner. Not parts to picker, picker to parts. And they work together with the robot. So how does that work? So here I have two pictures of such type of robots. In the right lower corner we see small robots. You can pick only small items with these robots. So the worker travels with the robot, and you pick small things. You put it on the robot, and when you're done, you have completed an order. The robot goes to the packing station. So the robot also picks up empty totes, and basically the picker can do picking all the time. So we don't have to go to the packing station ourselves. And that means that you save time. The picker becomes more productive because the picker can only be active with picking. You don't have to start up and finish the order. That's done by the robot. Yeah? So we save on average about 20% of the time. So we can be 20% more productive, approximately. So these are small robots. You can also do with bigger robots, like these. So these are order picking trucks. So the trucks can carry one or multiple pallets. This is typically used in store-based order picking. So this is for online orders, small orders. This is for big orders. Many boxes for one store. Think of a chain store. So we can pick even 5 pallets simultaneously in one round. So we can drive the truck, but when we get off the truck, it's no longer a truck. It behaves like a robot. It starts following you, and you can position it accurately. Right? So it's a truck and a robot together. But still, in all these cases, the human picks the orders, not the robot. The robot is only used for traveling. Yeah. Okay, so these are the systems in the right lower corner. So there are a lot of other systems. People and I have also done research on some other systems. I'm only going to talk. Yeah. So these robots are really very popular. And there's a reason that they are so popular. So the number is growing very rapidly, these AMRs. And AMRs are also used for multiple things. You can use them for all kinds of purposes. But I'm going to talk particularly about sorting and picking functions of these robots. These are also very popular functions of these robots. But they're also used for other things. So why are they so popular? Well, basically they combine properties of automated picking and manual picking. Automated parts to picker system. Here we have this robotic mobile fulfillment system, or the Amazon robotic system. It's not Amazon, it's a different company. But here you see this rack carried by a robot with these ring lights at the bottom. So the robot carries the rack and brings it to a pick station. And here they have a fully manual system. You walk with a pick part and you have to walk yourself. You walk through the entire warehouse, you pick. In this case, for multiple orders simultaneously, because the picker has 2 totes with him, maybe for 2 different orders. Right? Now, this is a pros and cons. This one, advantage of automated parts to picker systems, you can achieve very high throughput with that. If you really have to do a large number of orders a day, this is not really feasible to do it like you see in the picture on the right. But that's very hard to do. But you can achieve very high throughput with this. The problem is, it's so expensive. It's really very costly to do. Why is it so costly? All your racks now have to become mobile. So if you're a new company, you start up, it's different because you have an existing company. You have to pull down your complete warehouse and start from scratch. And that's very costly and also very time consuming. So it's very expensive. This one is very cheap. And you can immediately start doing it. Very simple. And it's also extremely flexible. But you don't have the high throughput capacity. So there's pros and cons. And the nice thing of these robots is you have a bit of both. You can become more productive than this, and you retain the flexibility of that. So higher productivity in manual, not as high as fully automated, higher in the manual, and very flexible. It's so flexible you can even combine it with manual productivity. So if you have a small business, you start manual, and when you increase your business, you can introduce robots to help you. And you can just do it together. You can mix it. It's quite safe. So there's no risk. So you can gradually introduce it, which is very nice. Because if you want to implement something like this, you might have to pay, let's say, 700 million, I think, something like that, to start. And in Europe, the price in China is lower, but still, in Europe, this is the cost of such a system at a big scale. Think of an Amazon warehouse. 700 million. You only for the system, not for the building, just for the system. So it's expensive, and these ones are cheap. So that's the reason that it's so popular. Okay, now there are different types of, you might say, using these robots. So the two types are called system-directed and swarm, sometimes called fixed. I use these fixed and system-directed interchangeably being the same. So what is system-directed or fixed, and what is swarm? Let me start with system-directed. So the green spots is the top view of the warehouse. The green spots are locations where we have to pick a customer order. You have to visit these locations. So the first location is this one. So the robot and the picker travel simultaneously together. It should be in the eye of it. And then after they have paired, they have met each other, they stay together. So they pick together the complete order. They travel together. For example, using the shortest path. They travel together until the order is finished, and then the robot leaves and departs to the packing station to pack the order. And the picker continues with a different robot, a different order. So you can continuously keep on picking the order, right? This is fixed. Now, system-directed or swarm works differently. So we have now to pick two orders of blue, one and the red one red robot and one blue robot. The red robot collects the red order, the blue robot collects the blue order. And the picker just chooses the closest robot at that point in time. So he switches all the time between the robots, opportunistically, which one is the closest, for example. Right? So you're not stuck to one robot, no, you can work with multiple robots in a swarm policy. So which one do you think is better? Swarm or fixed? Okay, who votes for swarm? Raise your hand. You have to cast a vote. You have to cast a compulsory. Who votes for swarm? Raise your hand. Higher. I can see it. Okay. Who votes for fixed? Fixed. 2. No. Don't put it down. Now you see that's not what support. 2, right? And some people didn't vote. I saw that. Still. Okay, who's right? The answer is you might vote with. But in most cases, swarm is better. But still, sometimes fixed. Okay, that's the answer. I come to that question later. That was a question we wanted to answer. By the way, people, we also have worked on that. So, this is a security camera shot of a swarm operation. This is a bit accelerated, that people don't really walk that fast in a warehouse. So you see that the robots are waiting. So we have many more robots than pickers. The robots are waiting for the picker, and the picker just finds the closest robot in his or her zone to pick that order. And the robot indicates which order you have to pick. So the first paper we started working on, recently published, after many years, I have to say, because I've been working on it for a long time, it has been rejected. That's how it goes. So that's finally published. First paper, we wanted to know whether it would work to zone the system. Now, what does zoning mean? This is zoning. So here we have the system with no zoning, and here we have the same system with zoning. In this case, with two zones. You might also say no zoning means one zone. And one zone is the same, no zoning. And you have 2 zones, 3 zones, so you should just partition the warehouse. What does it mean? It means in no zoning, you have to pick the complete order. So in any part of the warehouse, it doesn't matter where the order is stored, you have to travel the entire warehouse for an order. But here, we zone it, so a picker only picks in the blue zone, or a picker only picks in the green zone. Picker does not go from blue to green. The robot does. So we have an order that has to be picked in the blue and the green zone. The picker only picks in the blue zone, and the robot then moves to the green zone, and then the next picker continues with that order. Yeah? Is that clear? So 2 pickers are needed to pick the order in this case. And this basically means that you shorten the travel time for the picker. Right? Travel time becomes a bit shorter because you travel only in your own zone. You don't travel in 2 zones. So which one is better? Zoning or no zoning? If you use fixed assignment. Let's do the second. Who votes no zoning is better? And better means, for example, higher throughput capacity with the same resources. No zoning is better. Zoning is better? Okay, I have to say voting is compulsory, eh? Don't abstain from voting. What do you think? Which one is better?
Zoning may be better.
Zoning may be better. But you know the answer. You know the answer. It depends, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes zoning is better, sometimes no zoning is better. But what does it depend on? What is the prime factor? What is the prime? There are several factors. But really, the prime factor. Under which conditions might zoning be better? Under several conditions. The prime factor. Order size. Very good, Jeroen. Can you explain that? So, if you have small orders, which one is better? Small orders. No zoning or zoning?
I think zoning.
Zoning would be better for small. Why is zoning better if you have orders that are really small? Let's say 2, 3 picks. Location you have to visit. But your intuition is right. So assume you have a small order. Let's say 2 picks, 2 locations, and you have no zoning. You have to travel the entire warehouse for 2 picks only, meaning you're more traveling than order picking. You have a lot of unproductive time, no value added time. So you have to travel a lot. So if your orders are small, it's better to do this. So if you have 2 lines, big probability that one line is here, the other line is there. And then you have to travel only here and back, or here and back. Much shorter travel. You see that? Otherwise, you have to travel the first one and then all the way to the second one. So, small orders, zoning. Large orders, no zoning. Clear for everyone? Large orders, you have to travel anywhere, anyway. Then it does not make sense to hand over halfway to another picker because that just introduces extra waiting time. If you have to hand over, the robot has to queue for the other picker, meaning longer throughput times of the orders, right? So large orders don't zone. Small orders zone. Yeah, that's it. That's intuition. So these are just the trade-offs. So with no zoning, you have longer picker travel time, but you have only one time matching a robot with a picker, so only one time waiting. But if you have zoning, then the travel time for the picker becomes shorter, but you have many more moments that you have to match with a robot. Yeah? So the waiting time increases. So the throughput time of the order will become longer, potentially. So there's a trade-off between travel time and wait time. So the question that we wanted to address is, when is zoning better than no zoning? And apparently Joram already gave the answer, so we know that now, but okay, we wanted to find that out. And we also have another question, I come back to it later, because zoning here in this case is static, but you can also do this completely dynamic, meaning sometimes you have one zone, sometimes two zones, sometimes three zones, and you can switch from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, from 4 to 3, from 1 to no zoning. You can do it completely dynamically. Why is that? Because it's just a robot. It's just controlled by software. There's no hardware, nothing. In traditional zone picking system, we need conveyors. Here is no conveyors. It's completely software controlled. So we can do it even dynamically, meaning sometimes we have bigger orders, sometimes smaller, we just switch as we please. Yeah, that's dynamic switch. That's the other question you wanted to see. So this is the model. There was a queuing network model that we made for this one. So the first stage of the model, the first process step is we have to match the robot with an order picker. So they have to travel jointly to the first location. That's step one. We travel together. And then we do the rest of the order together. And after that, the third step, and that is the robot now has to move to the demo, to the packing station. So we have very simple queuing network. We want all the waiting steps, right? So we queuing the testing model. Consisting of 3 processes. Traveling together to the first one, doing everything together, the robot departing, the picker matching with an ambulance. These are the 3 processes. Process 1, travel. Process 2. Process 2, travel. Process 3. So that's basically it. Travel to demo, we can monitor with one server. So this is how you that's the problem with the first step is that you have to first travel jointly to the first location. So we view at it from the picker's perspective, we have to send the picker. So the picker travels, the robot of course also, but the first stage is the extra time that the picker needs in order to get to that point. Then they travel together. So we have 2-stage service process. So this is where the picker travels to the first location, the setup time, and then you do everything together. That's what the end. And of course, there's also a queue here. You have to wait for the robot. And then you do everything together. So that's the first step. Then the second step is the travel of the empty and the loaded robot. So the loaded robot, and the robot is done, comes on the picking, but the second stage is on the picking. After the picking, we travel to a demo. The robot does that. Of lots. There's a waiting queue here. You have to wait for the packer, for example. Might be multiple servers also. A single server, but it might be multiple servers. And then the robot travels back to the picker. So that's a whole network. Yeah? So you can shortcut that. We assume there's an infinite supply of orders. There's always orders available to be picked. Robots have to wait. Then this is the step. The picker has to travel there. And then they pick together. These are the 3 steps, the 2 stages of the process. So we have a closed queuing network. And we can also extend it to multiple pickers. So this was with one picker, only one. But we can also do it for multiple pickers. So we have multiple parallel pickers here. We've got the setup phase and the pick phase of that process. It means we pick everything together. So there's a closed network, and a closed network is very good if you want to establish the maximum throughput capacity of the system. Because a closed network assumes there is always work available. And you can see how much work you can really do with a given number of resources. So there's no lack of work. We never have to wait for it. So it's good for measuring the capacity of that network. Yeah? So that's why we chose for a closed network. Now this is for one zone or no zone, but you can also extend it for 2 zones. It becomes a bit more complicated because now we have to know the probability that you can skip the second zone or the probability that you can skip the first zone. So you don't always have to do both zones. So it becomes a little bit more complicated, but these probabilities you can determine. It's not too complicated to do that. right? And now, this is 2 zones. You can also extend to 3 zones. And of course, the network becomes more and more complicated. So we can go up to 6, 7 zones, and it's still doable. Beyond that, it doesn't become very nice. Yeah? Okay, so how do we analyze this? Well, for this one, we just solve all the equilibrium equations. So we solve all the balance equations for the equilibrium probabilities, just solving the continuous time of change. So we just write it out. You can do that. How do you do this one? Basically, this one you aggregate things. You make it smaller, because now you know it for a single, you might say for a single system, you know this. You insert that, you make it a bit smaller, and then you calculate again. So, kind of technique, you aggregate, and then you disaggregate. So, what comes out? Now, this is a graph of the throughput capacity. So, you might say higher is better. Now, here you have different zoning strategies. No zoning, up to 6 zones. Throughput capacity. Here you have the number of robots, and here we're given order size. Now, what you might notice is the order size is quite small. So, there's a warehouse with 24 hours. It's a big warehouse. 24 hours. So, order size 4, meaning the travel time is probably quite long if you have no zoning for the picker. And that's indeed what you can see. In this big warehouse with a relatively small orders, really the highest throughput capacity is what you see is this zoning. You see that? Particularly if the number of robots increases, the zoning is better. This is no zoning. It's really dominated by all the zoning policies. So no zoning is very poor, which is obvious because there are only 4 picks and it's a huge warehouse, 24 hours. So no zoning is not good. You have to travel too much. And you can see that 6 zones, if you have a large number of roads, is the optimum. Yeah. Not always. So here they have fewer zones. Here you have 4 zones. But this situation changes when the order size increases. So we gradually increase order size now. So then we go to an order size of 20. This whole picture is reversed. Because what you can see is now, no zoning is now the best of all. So it dominates all the zoning policies. So no zoning is really the best. Which is obvious because now the orders are very big. So really in every hour you have to pick something. So it does not make a lot of sense to split it in multiple zones. Yeah? So intuition of your number was very good. Okay, now what you can also do is now try to optimize the number of zones, but in this case with dynamic order size, because this was all with fixed order sizes. The order sizes can also be dynamic, sometimes big orders, sometimes small orders. So we use the orders of a real company, and we sample from those orders. So orders that we sample have variable sizes. And what you can now do is minimize the number or the hourly cost. So this is the cost. And we have 3 decision parameters. Decision parameter, the number of robots, the number of pickers, and the zoning policy, the number of zones we want to have. Yeah? Now we have a constraint here, because we want that the hourly throughput must be sufficiently large. So we want to minimize the cost. This is the cost of the robots, this is the cost of the robots, the cost of the pickers per hour. And the constraint is you have to pick sufficiently many orders. The capacity must be large enough. Okay, so what is the outcome? Now, different situations. Here we have the situation with only small orders. Here is the probability that the order is small. So we sample from the company's orders, and we call an order small when the size is less than five or fewer lines in the order. And we call it big when the order has more than 5 lines, so 6 lines or more. So here with a probability of 1, it's a small order. All the orders are small. So we sample only small orders. There's still variable size. And here you see the optimal cost. So in this case, with 10 pickers, 14 robots, and 2 zones, that leads to the optimal cost of 256. And the throughput time sorry, the throughput capacity is 148. We have a requirement of 146. So yes, we need the throughput constraint. Yeah, so this is the optimal configuration. 256. But you see there are other solutions that are quite close to it. The situation changes when we have also large orders. So now we have 50% small and 50% large orders. Then you see that with large orders, well, one optimal solution is no zoning in cost. You see that? But there's another optimal solution which has 3 zones. So they give you the same cost. So in terms of capacity, when you have large orders, no zoning might be better, but in terms of cost, that's not necessarily always true. So a different objective. The first one was only looking at capacity. Now we look at capacity and cost. We minimize the cost given a capacity cost. So we see that there are multiple solutions close to each other. Some are zoning, 3 zones, and some are no zoning. So in view of cost, it's not so clear which one is really the better. They might be very close together, in fact. Okay, so now we have another idea. That is, why don't we make the zones dynamic? So depending on the order portfolio that you have to do, so you look at all orders in the queue, the orders arrive online. You look at orders, you say, wow, there's quite a few large, you might now start no zoning. Or there are quite a few small, maybe we should start zoning. We do dynamic. And of course, this is the best policy you might imagine, right? Because then you always do the optimal thing. So we wanted to know how good is that really to switch dynamic. So we made a stochastic dynamic model of this. One was a stochastic dynamic programming model to determine what is the best policy given the state of the system. So the orders arrive, we have orders waiting, then we have this model, estimated throughput capacity. So we use that as a box, as a toolbox within this extended model. And then we determine what is the best one at this point in time. Maybe no zoning is better, given the state of our system, or maybe we should go for this one. I mean, just calculate the throughput capacity with that model that I showed you before, but now in dynamic fashion. Okay, we distinguish 3 types of costs. The cost of waiting, you always have to wait. We distinguish the cost of postponing. We have a limited waiting capacity. We can have a huge queue of waiting orders. If there are too many, we just postpone them. There's a cost involved. If we postpone orders to, for example, the next day or the next batch. And there's a cost of switching. We make the model very simple. We switch only between no zones and 2 zones. So we make it very simple. What is the state of the system, the number of small orders in the queue, the number of large orders, and the current policy, the number of zones. But there are only 2 possibilities, zoned or not zoned. Zone means 2 zones, make it very simple. So this is very simple. So the options we have, actions we can take it. We change, we leave it as is. If we have 1 zone, we keep it at 1 zone. We have 2 zones, we keep it at 2 zones, or we change, move it from 1 to 2, from 2 to 1. These are the actions we can do. Right? Okay, so this is the rate of moving out of the state. The order can arrive, small order, large order can arrive, or we can finish an order. So these probabilities of small and large are known. These are data. So this is what we want to minimize, these costs. These are the total cost per time unit. So it consists of waiting costs. So this is the number of orders waiting in the queue, multiplied by the waiting cost per order per time unit. This is the probability of postponing an order. Cost of postponing an order only in this state. And this is the cost of switching between the 2 options. So we have 3 types of costs, and we want to minimize that. So this is what we did. And we use quite standard formulation of this type of model. So basically the average cost.
So Professor, may I have a question? Yes. Do you have some switching cost?
Yes.
Is this a switching cost?
But the question, of course, is what is switching cost?
Yeah.
So we have been thinking, what is switching cost? In theory, you can switch without any cost. But in reality, there will be a small delay because robots are currently carrying on, doing an order. You cannot just say in the middle of an order that you have to do something else. There might be a small time that you need to switch from one policy to another, maybe a couple of minutes.
Okay.
And we assign a cost to that.
Okay.
So the switching cost is just basically a time delay.
Okay.
Because you might be in the middle of something.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So different policies will use different sets of humans and the robots.
Yes.
For example, if we switch from...
But this is with a given number of robots and pickers. Huh? We assume this is given. So,
yeah,
the given warehouse, given number of robots, given number of pickers.
Okay.
So if you want to change that, you have to apply the model a second time or a third time.
Okay.
Yeah?
Got it.
But for that given situation, given warehouse, given arrival rates, everything is known. You can determine what is the best policy. So you want to determine the optimal policy. When should you switch? A policy is, if this is the state of the system, then switch or then not switch. Yeah? That's a policy. So F is the policy. We want to find the policy that minimizes these average costs with time limits. And there's just only method to do that. So you value iteration, you do numerically. You can do exactly, you can only do numerically. Right? We can find numerically the optimal policy. Okay, so now what's the optimal policy? Well, the optimal policy will always give you the lowest cost. So what we do is compare now a fixed policy with the optimal policy of dynamic switching. And that's what you see here. You see the cost difference compared to dynamic switching. So the zero line means the lowest cost, dynamic switching. And I have two policies that you compare, no zoning or progressive zoning. No zones or two zones. Now, on the horizontal axis, you see the probability of a small order. So let's look at the black dots first. So the black dots are the no zoning policy. If the probability of a small order is very small over here, it means that we have many large orders. If we have many large orders, you see that no zoning is equally good as dynamic switching, the best theoretically possible. But there is no difference. If there are sufficient large orders, there is no benefit of dynamic switching. The fixed policy of no zoning is equally good. Only when there are many small orders, you see there is a small difference. No zoning becomes slightly worse than dynamic switching. Now, let's look at the other policy, progressive zoning. When there are many large orders, zoning is not good. You see that there's a gap. The gap can even be 120% worse than dynamic switching. The gap can be huge with progressive zoning. However, when there are many small orders, you see that it's equally good as dynamic switching. So what is now the conclusion? The conclusion is dynamic switching is the best, but depending on the percentage of small and large orders, you can also do a static policy which is equally good. Sometimes no zoning is the best, equally good, and sometimes zoning is the best. Now, to be honest, we were very disappointed with this result. And at the beginning, we thought we really had something because there was the area of overlap was very small. There was always a gap in the middle where progressive zoning was better, but there was a bug in our code. And we found out the bug later, and it appeared that there's no gap. So, no zoning is always equally good as progressive zoning in this range, and zoning is always equally good as dynamic zoning in this range. So there is no gap. Well, it was a negative result for us because we thought we had found something really interesting. No company did that, dynamic switching, and now we found there's also no need to do it because there's no benefit. Negative result. Well, these things happen in science, unfortunately. So, but we're still able to publish it now, but we just rewrote the paper completely from dynamic zoning is so good, it's so good, to no, dynamic zoning is not so good, and this is the reason why. So we wrote a different paper. Questions? No? If not, I continue with the next one. Because now we have found out that working together with robots, yes, it really brings something. Increase the productivity. You can do it at acceptable cost. But what is the impact on the humans? So the human, you work with these things. Is it nice for a human to work with a robot? Is it better than doing the orders yourself? Can you be more productive, really? So we want to find out all these things. Let's see what comes up. So we wanted to answer a couple of questions. What is the best collaboration strategy? Basically, there are two different ways you can work together with a robot in a fixed assignment. So the robot can follow the human leads the robot, so the robot follows you like a dog, so it comes behind you, or you are led by the robot. The robot's there, you follow the robot. You might say that's the same. Yeah, and the model is the same, but in reality that's not the same. There are differences. Yeah, and the model is the same, no difference in the model. And the second one is we wanted to know what is the impact of personality traits of the workers on performance, because people are all different. You might like this, and your friend likes something else. We are different, and we are also different at work. And we wanted to know what is the impact of working with robots for different people with different personalities. So, two questions. Okay, let me show you some short videos of the experiment we did in our lab. So we have a lab warehouse. Here's what PhD students. And here is the human leading. So how is he? Picking the orders, he has wrist-mounted terminal, walks to the location, stops, the robot follows him like a dog, and drops it in the tote for the customer. Right? This one is different. The same terminal is now mounted on the robot. The robot goes to the location, stops, you look at the terminal, and then you pick. Right? The robot is leading. You might already see there's a bit of a difference in attitude. Do you see that? The same guy, but he doesn't behave the same way. So in the model it's the same, but this is not the same. What is different? Okay, so a regression model, the dependent variable is the total productivity. The productivity is the number of correct order lines picked without errors in 20 minutes. So we did multiple runs of 20 minutes. That's so 20 minutes work. So what do we see? We pick about 60 orders or 60 lines in 20 minutes. That's the baseline. So here we have the variable human leading. So basically the baseline is the robot is leading. If the human is leading, we pick about 5 lines more in 20 hours. So our productivity increases with approximately 12% compared to the robot is leading. So when the human is leading, yes, we become more productive. We just do more. And the model is the same, but not in reality. In reality, you're 12% more productive than the human needs. However, there's also a downside. The downside is there's also a little bit more errors. So here the dependent variable is the number of errors in 20 minutes. Baseline 4 errors in 20 minutes. But if the human is leading, we make 0.6 errors more in 20 minutes. A little bit more errors. So that's not very nice. Of course, you can take measures that errors are reduced to 0 again. You can do that. But that sometimes also takes a little bit additional time. Anyway, it's good to know that there is a downside to increasing productivity. Trades off with errors. And now we want to know what's the impact of the personality of the picker. How does that impact the productivity? So we looked into a concept which is called regulatory focus. And there are 2 different types of regulatory focus. The first one is called promotion focus. Promotion focus is basically promotion focus at work. That is basically how do you want, regulatory focus in general, is how do you want to achieve your goals at work. That's regulatory focus. So we did not invent this ourselves. This is well-known concept from psychology. It's really very known. A lot of research about regulatory focus. So the books have been written on this. It's also very easy to measure. So there are 14 questions, 7 for prevention and 7 for promotion focus. You just answer these questions. And the 5 will be extra. Okay. Promotion focus means you just directly go for the goal. People who are more promotion focused go for the goal directly. And people who are more prevention focused, they also go for the goal, but they go indirectly. They try to achieve the goal by avoiding anything that hinders you from getting there. You try to avoid obstacles. So I might say there's also a relation with risk aversion. So the prevention focused people are a little bit more risk averse. Now, in reality, people are both. You have a little bit of promotion focus and a little bit of prevention focus. But one dominates the other. It's not like you're in balance. You're in balance. One is typically more than the other. So you're more prevention or more promotion. And when you have a lot of prevention, you typically have little promotion focus. So there's a trade-off between these two to some extent. Although you can have both, there's also a bit of a trade-off. Good. Clear for everyone? Now, what's the impact of we measure particularly the level of prevention focusing? And you see it's all significant. How does that work? So it has an effect. This is the effect. This interaction plot of prevention focus. You see here, again, the productivity, but it's not measured in productivity in lines per 20 minutes, with the time per line. So higher value means lower productivity, more time per line, right? Higher is worse, lower is better. What you can see here is if you compare the left with the right. Left is human leading, the right, human supporting, or the robot is leading. You see that when human is leading, the levels are always lower than when the robot is leading, meaning you're indeed more productive. That's what we already know, right? 12% more productive. That's indeed what we recognize here as well. But there's another effect, because there are two types of people with a very low prevention focus, and people with a very high prevention focus. And you might see there's a big difference between these two types of people. The people with low prevention focus are much slower than the people with high prevention focus. So you might see that people with very high prevention focus, you might see low promotion focus, high prevention focus. For them, it doesn't matter whether they lead a robot or whether they follow a robot. No difference. The difference between this and that is not significant. But for the other type of people with a low prevention focus, typically people with a very high promotion focus. Yes, for them it makes a difference. If they lead a robot, they are much more productive. Time per line is much more low than when the robot is leading the picture. So basically, when they start following the robot, they just give up. They're not productive anymore. So, yes, we know that human leading is more productive, but it's only because of the people with very low prevention focus. Because the people with high prevention focus are not affected at all. So, if you want to know whether you can become more productive, you should test what type of people you have, because personality has been done. And you can easily test this body. So this is we thought interesting. Now, are people also becoming more happy if they work with a robot? And the answer is yes. Because we compare this with completely manual picking. You see that whether they lead or whether they follow, they're just happy to work with a robot. So the task satisfaction, also a well-known construct. In psychology, we know exactly how to measure that. Task satisfaction is very important for warehouse operators, for warehouse employers. Because if your people are not happy, they don't work very long with you. You have to be happy at work. We want to make them happy because we want to retain people. Yeah? So this problem looks important in China. I can tell you in Europe, this is number one. Please make people happy at work. Otherwise they leave and we are screaming for people. Yeah, so this is the most important thing for a company. Even when it does not affect productivity, we want people to be happy. You see, they are more happy to work with a robot compared to not working with a robot. Yeah, so this is also important to know. But this was public quality. Worked with Alexander was probably my PhD student, one of my colleagues in the department. Okay, how much time do I have left? Because I handled now question 1 and 2, now question 3.
I think you have at least 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Yeah. Okay, I have some time to also tell something about this research question. and maybe also briefly the last one. Okay, so this looks at a different type of robot. We don't pick small orders now, we pick big orders. It's still collaborative picking. Now we pick large orders. So you can see getting 2 pallets with you. And some of these robots can even carry 5 pallets. So we can pick for 5 different customers or one very big customer in a route. So we travel in a route, picker drives the truck, then steps off to pick something, and then the robot starts following the picker. Yeah, that's the system. And the question we wanted to address here is how to stack the pallets around the picker. Let me give you an example. This is a company with the warehouse, and we have to pick, in this case, 5 different products. And the 5 products have different colors because they belong in different classes. What are the classes? We have heavy items, medium items, light items. And we cannot stack a heavy on top of a light. We can only stack light on top of heavy. So there's constraints. Where do these constraints come from? Well, there are many constraints in store-based order picking. So if you go back to this picture and you look, how can you stack them? Well, there are steps. There's a relation with stability. Might be a relation with you don't want to have light or medium, but typically these come from store requirements. So they call it family grouping. So what is a store requirement? If you pick for a store, the store says, I want to have that pallet, but I don't want to travel with that pallet or that roll cage in the store. So it must be stacked exactly in the shape of my shelf. So at the bottom of the shelf must be here. So I want to stack it like that. And don't mix it with shelf 1 and shelf 2 and 3, because then I have to walk all the way up and down. I don't want to do that. Minimize the work in the store. That leads to very strict precedence constraints. So all these constraints are very important. They tell you the precedence of stacking in combination with all kinds of stability constraints. That's where these constraints come from. Yeah? So one of the prime constraints is sort of class constraint. You group them in classes, class 1, below class 2, below class 3. Right? Not the other way around. You can put class 2 next to class C, but you cannot put class 1 on top. Now, if you take the shortest route, the ESP path from example path, so using the algorithm of Rene de Koster, you can calculate the shortest path in this warehouse, but it leads to an infeasible stack. Because in this case, box 2 is stacked on box 4, and box 4 is a lighter box than box 2. Box 2 belongs to class 1. It should be below box 4. So this is an infeasible stack and does not meet our precedence constraint. So optimal routing might mean infeasible stack. So if you want to create an optimal stack, then you have to make a detour. So basically what you have to do is look at both objectives. Short route, good stack. Try to optimize the combination. Now that is a new problem. So of course this is done in practice every day, but not in optimal fashion, I can tell you. So there is no one who does it optimally. But you can still make a feasible pallet. So we want to have a pallet as low as possible, meeting all the constraints, and a route that's also as short as possible. And in this case, you see that, yes, you have to make a detour, because we now first do 3 and 4, and 1 and 2, then 5 in the end. But that is the optimal path leading to this stack, which is feasible. And it's a longer path than the shortest path. Yeah. So we looked at the problem in combination. We had first to do this, so I compared with many others, with no one else. So how do we do it? So we cannot solve it to optimality, let me be honest. It's a very difficult problem. So 3D bit tracking, you might know that.
Yeah.
That's actually really difficult. It's so tough. So a lot of computational power, and so you cannot solve it to optimality for realistic studies. So we do a user heuristic. The heuristic uses the concept of layer. So we have layers, 1, 2, 3, and the layer concept is defined iteratively. In the layer, you can also stack items on top of each other. You still can do that. But the layer is also formed by, there must be at least one box who touches the bottom, and which is also the highest. And this is the height of the layer. Within it, you can stack things on top of each other. But you cannot exceed the box that touches the bottom. You cannot do it. And that's a sort of iterative definition, because if you use that, you can also define the second one on top of that and the third one. So we stack by layer and then form the layers gradually. That's how we try to do it. And you can see this is a feasible solution because there's no blue box stacked on top of a yellow box or on top of a pink box. And the pink box, the lightest ones are on top. So this is a feasible set. But of course, you can rotate things that makes the 3D bin packing problem so difficult. So there's a lot of rotation symmetry. You have to include that. So let me skip the model. Just look at the objective. So we want to minimize the travel time. This is the travel time, the distance between location I and j. And if we pick item I before item j, this is what we have to travel. So this is the binary Sij. And then this is the height of the pellets. So GL is the height of layer L. And we don't know how many layers we have. We form them iteratively. So we don't know how many. We just have a maximum number of possible layers, but you don't have to reach that. It's a set of possible layers we can choose from. And epsilon is a very small weight. And we choose it small so that we first minimize the travel time. And as a secondary objective, we minimize the height of the pellets, because the lower the pellet, the more pellets we can get in our truck. And we want to minimize it. But still, we have to meet all the constraints. The constraints are routing constraints. We have this linking, the routing, and the stacking. All the other constraints are stacking constraints. Stacking constraint meaning you can never stack heavy on top of light. You cannot do that. The stack must be stable. We have to form the layers. Boxes cannot stick out. They cannot overlap. All these constraints you have to include. And this is stability constraint, particularly the left. All these three you have to do is stability. So you cannot let boxes float in the air, for example. And there must always be something underneath. There must be sufficient support of a box. And there must at least be alpha percentage overlap. Alpha you can determine yourself. So you cannot float in the air.
Question: Is this model just for one vehicle or?
Yes, one pallet.
One pallet.
Yes.
Okay. I'm thinking because in practice, multiple vehicle may be used to collect the cell.
Yeah, but every vehicle still has to collect one pallet. Eh?
Okay.
That's the idea. So you have to. So you also have a batching problem, which pallets should be collected by which vehicle. For example, you have a capacity for more than one pallet. Which pallet should you combine?
Yeah.
But we basically solve it from pallet by pallet. So we assume we can carry only one pallet. Basically.
I'm thinking the first stage when we assign orders to the vehicle, we may price to more beneficial or.
Yeah, but the pallets are determined by the store, by the customer. So they determine what you want to have. One pallet goes to one store.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so the customers are big. They're not e-commerce orders, one thing. No, they order a truckload full of something.
Okay. So
Yeah, so and this pallet is for this department in the store. That's the pallet we want to have.
Okay.
Yeah, they order multiple pallets even.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we have two algorithms basically. The first algorithm minimizes the travel time first, and it assumes very strict precedence constraints. So this is very strict. So we can never store something heavy on that, and all these. So this is basic, and also the other constraints that I mentioned, and the routing constraints. So feasible routes, very simple. We just make sure that we never have a light below a heavy one, right? But we don't look into stability, nothing. So this is an algorithm that's not necessarily meeting all the constraints. But then we start improving. So we can solve this very efficiently by it, or relatively efficiently. You can solve this. And so this is basically only routing with some additional constraint, namely not having on light. And this is what you can solve to optimality in polynomial time. So you can solve this because it's just a modification of the Rene de Koster algorithm, which is polynomial, which is linear. So, let me skip the proof. It's not very difficult, by the way. So the first route, meeting basic constraint and then stack. We still have to solve the stacking part. So we do first routing, and then stack. Optimal routing, then stack. That's not as good as do it together. It is not very bad. How do we do the stacking? We use an algorithm which is called maxstack. We modify that and we apply it by layer. So maxstack stacks one layer. Modify it in two respects. We can also now stack items on top of each other within a layer. maxstack doesn't do that. We allow that. And then we do it for multiple layers on top of each other. That's our adaptation. Yeah? So I can skip details. I skip also this. And we allow a number of improvements. So the improvements we allow is if we have two layers like that. So this is layer 1, 3 boxes. This is layer 2, 3 boxes. But you see they're all blue. We can easily swap them. Yeah, so it will not impact the stability of the count. We can swap them. And what we can also do is not swap entire layers, but also, for example, move an item. We can just see whether this item might fit in another layer of the same class, same precedence class. So we can just try all the options there to see whether we can shorten the routing. And another one we do is with the swap layers, move items, number 3. Swap items. Yeah, we just swap it. So here you see a pin item in layer 3, you can move it to layer 4 and then move this one to layer 3. See that improves. So we try all these options and we still try to find the shortest path. Yeah, so we just perturb the solution of algorithm 1. Of course, this takes more time to try all these options. Outcome. So we have real orders in a real warehouse. This is the warehouse, big warehouse. With real orders, we know all the locations. But we don't know the classes of the items. We just don't know. So we just invented the classes. So the first thing we did is, what we can do is assign the classes based on the shortest path. So we just calculate the shortest path to stack these out. We say the first part is A, is heavy. The next ones are medium. The next ones are light. We just do it ourselves. So we know the optimal outcome. Because the optimal outcome will be the TSP path. In this case, we know the optimal solution. We don't know the optimal stack height, but we do know the optimal travel time. So this is what Gurobi came up with for that case. So Gurobi can solve it for small cases. This is cases with 18 boxes per pallet, 36 boxes. Large pallet with 72 boxes on one pallet. So Gurobi can solve this. Part of that, none of these. So these are algorithms, algorithm 1, algorithm 2. The bold ones are the best ones, meaning optimal solution, because we know the optimal solution, at least for travel time, not for stack height. And also the shortest computation time. And sometimes they're equally good, but one is shorter time. And then we still make that one with shorter time bold. So what you can see is we always get travel time as the TSP path. So we always have the optimal path. With the algorithms. The same as Gurobi, always optimal. And in many cases, we also have lower stacks than Gurobi. So we can improve Gurobi in many cases. Or we have shorter times. So we are pretty good. Take algorithm 1, algorithm 2 takes a bit more time. Sometimes it's really better. See the example here? Yeah, it's not a lot better here, 1 centimeter lower. So this is 133 centimeters, the height of the pallet. So the first part is the travel time. The part behind the digit is the stacked height in centimeters. Because you choose a weight of 4.1 for the stack. So yes, they're pretty good. So let me just skip that. I just skip that. I just wanted to say this is a real case. So these are real pallets. And this is a company. We work together with a software company, and they have been working on stacking algorithms for, I think, 20, 30 years. They're really extremely good at stacking. So can we beat the company? Well, we have been working for years on that, but we think we now can beat it. But they worked for 30 years, 20, 30 years with that. So the balance that it found is the pin value. So this is the distance that these real stack pallets have to travel. These are our two algorithms. The algorithm 1 is orange, the algorithm 2 is blue. So shorter means better, shorter travel time. This is the theoretical shortest travel time possible because this is the TSP path. But of course, the TSP path is never feasible. Right? It will not be feasible one. So in most cases, you see that we are a bit better. How much better are we? Not a lot. 3.4% shorter travel. And with algorithm 2, 3.5% shorter travel. So we can beat it. Pretty happy about it. And we also have lower pallets. Simultaneously, our pallets can be stacked lower, and they've been working it for ages. So yes, I think we did a good job. We can have lower pallets simultaneously. So this was a research question 3. Can we solve it together? Yes, we can, but not optimally. We just have to find good heuristic algorithms. But it works also for real instances. Last question is a question Pipon has also been working on, but I want to present the work that you did not work on with Mari Gorashi. We also have been working on this. But I don't have a lot of time yet, so maybe I should just go to the final results.
It's okay. I think we have 10 minutes.
10?
We can have 10 minutes Q&A. Our schedule time.
Didn't know it because you said I would be talking for an hour. I've been talking, and then.
Okay. I think we can.
Maybe I should just go to the.
Okay.
Well, let me just summarize, in a few sentences. Otherwise, it will keep you too long. I don't want to do that. So the first question I asked you, which one is better, fixed or swarm? And we really wanted to find out which one is really the better one. Fixed, because until now I've been talking about fixed, fixed assignments, not swarm. Swarm is also a very interesting policy. It's probably better than fixed in many cases. Although there are companies that use fixed, also many that use swarm strategy. So we want to know which one is now better. So, and there's a trade-off. So in a swarm policy compared to fixed, potentially the picker has to travel less because you can just go to a closest robot. You can always choose the best robot around you. So potentially the travel time of the picker will be shorter, right? However, every time you switch, there is some party that has to wait. Hopefully it's the robot wait for the picker, but it might also be the picker who has to wait for the robot. There's a lot more waiting. Is that clear? So it's not so obvious that swarm is always better. Yes, the travel time of the picker will be shorter, but there is a lot more waiting now because we have to synchronize all the time with different robots. Yes? So, it's not obvious that swarm is really better. Get that? So we made a queuing network model again because we want to capture all these weighting effects. You can also model it, by the way, deterministically. But then you have to resolve very, very frequently because you have to match every time and there's always delays, stochastic delays, and it's very difficult to capture that with a deterministic model. So we use the stochastic. But we've also done it deterministically, which is also very interesting. So we make it very simple, exponentially distributed service times, no congestion, no blocking. We neglect acceleration and deceleration of the robot. And we only they wait until there is a partner to be matched with. So one of the two always waits, and then we are matched. It's the model, but I think I really will skip that review of the time. The nice thing is for this model, so this is how we model it. So this is the picking time, this is the travel time of the picker to the location, and sometimes you have to wait for the robot. QX is the probability that you wait for a robot when you are arrived at the pick location. Then you have to wait for this time for the robot. So we have to estimate all these parameters. We do that for every pick. For every pick, we synchronize the picker with the robot. We synchronize it. And this is the travel time of the picker. This is the pick time. This is the travel time of the picker. And this is the waiting time, extra waiting time for the robot. Sometimes needed and sometimes not. And the nice thing is for this network, we can calculate the exact probability distribution. And yes, we assume this is exponential, but you can also do it for general distributions, even as long as they are fixed up. You can have exact expressions. So that makes it very nice. You can solve it exactly. Exact solution, okay, but it's still strict. This is the way we test it. So errors are okay, because you compare the simulation in these types of models, you compare this is really okay. This is what comes out. I have here a diagram which sketches on the horizontal axis the ratio of robots to pickers. So here you have 1 robot for every picker, here you have 3 robots for every picker. Here we have the order size. And we have 2 symbols, squares and circles. Circles mean swarm is better. Square means the system directed or fixed is better. And the intensity of the color indicates how much percent is better. You can see the difference is not that big. So sometimes swarm is better, sometimes system directed is better. Swarm is not always better. But this is quite a small warehouse, 8 aisles. Only 2 pickers, by the way, and the speeds of the robots and the pickers are the same. Now, we have some other results. What are the insights? Insight number 1. If we move from left to right in all these graphs, so we have more robots per picker, then gradually we see that it becomes more red, more circles, more circles. So, more robots per picker, swarm becomes better. Why is that? The picker does not have to wait for the robot. There's always a robot there. Right? So there's robots plenty. So more robots per picker, swarm becomes the better policy. The second insight is that when the order sizes become smaller, then we see that swarm indeed swarm becomes better as well. Sorry, that's not this one. Yes. So when order size becomes smaller, swarm becomes better in a system that is obvious, right? Because if you have to travel a whole warehouse for a small order, that's not good. You better work with a swarm policy where you can minimize the travel distance. You work with different robots. So swarm should become better when the order size decreases. Pretty obvious, right? Okay, the third one. Move from the left picture to the right picture. What's the difference? The difference between the left and the right picture is that we have more resources. Here we have 2 pickers, here we have 8 pickers. And of course, also the number of robots increases because you look at the ratio. So here we have more pickers. If you have more pickers, you see the same picture, less squares, more circles. Swarm is better if you have more resources. And this, the top 2 compared to the bottom 2, the difference is here the speeds are the same. The speaker is equally fast as the robot. But here the robots are so fast, they're twice as fast as a picker. When the robots are really fast, swarm is the better policy. Because the picker never has to wait for the robot. There's always a robot available. So the insights are pretty obvious. So indeed, system directed is sometimes better, but many cases where swarm becomes a better policy. And in fact, there are not too many cases where system directed is the best policy in throughput capacity. We have also done this in terms of costs, but I think in view of time, let me just wrap it up. So let me just wrap it up. So I've been talking about collaborative robots, 4 different questions. I have to admit the 4th one was really short. But what you can see is those collaborative robots, there is really a great future for these types of systems. They're cheap, you can increase productivity, and they're really very helpful for the people. People love to work with these robots. They just love it. So, in the near future, we will not see all completely robotic warehouses. We see many warehouses where we have both people and robots together. In 10, 20 years, we'll not switch completely to a robotic warehouse. We have both. At least, that's what I think. And what we also have seen is that in these collaborative systems, it's not just a system that determines performance, it's also the human that has a major impact on the joint performance. Because it's not just a system, it's also the people working that determine the performance. And I think it's also a great topic for academic research, and hopefully you can do some more look at the people in the room here. Thank you very much for your attention.